My group has just completed Chapter 6, the penultimate chapter of Shadows of the Dragon Queen, so it's time to talk about how the adventure went. This is a Game Master only zone going forward, as there will be spoilers. Our party is made up of Tristan Silverheart and Aasimar Paladin with the Knight of Solemnia background. Isolde de Lorimar, a warlock with the noble background and the fiancée of Tristan, spouse of Tristan, played by Tristan's player's partner, and both of their oaths are to each other, which works for me. Fletch Sinandel, a Qualinesti ranger with the folk hero background, because he badly injured a monster that some people thought was a dragon thanks to a very well-aimed shot, but because he knows it wasn't a dragon that he hit, he's got a little bit of imposter syndrome. Sibylina, a knight of Gilean, god of knowledge, who, because of her god's portfolio, was able to be raised in a community that didn't run into hostility from the locals when the cataclysm happened. And the party has two sidekick characters, Rig Roundrook and Tem Temble, a dwarven cleric and Kender druid respectively. I'm running the campaign using Foundry VTT, as our players are fairly geographically spread out, which comes with its own challenges, which I will be discussing during this video, along with some of the complications of our monthly schedule. Last chapter, the party, accompanied by a force from Calaman, led by Sir Darrett, had made their way across the northern wastes in search of the City of Lost Names, in the process rescuing a bronze dragon egg from the claws of the Red Dragon Army, having uncovered some horrific research into corrupted magic, and making friends with some of the locals and some of the local wildlife. At the end of the chapter, the army launched an attack on the entrance to the City of Lost Names as a distraction, while the party slipped into some cracks that would let them go deeper into the mountain where the city had come to rest. This chapter starts up with the party making their way through a dungeon that used to be a luxury apartment in the outer wall of the city, contending with some wildlife that had made its way in, along with some magical protections that were still active, before running into Demolin, a red-robed Sylvanesti mage who was the last survivor of the city and had been living there since the cataclysm. She gives the characters a combat test to see if she thinks they can withstand the Red Dragon Army forces within the city proper. Additionally, if a party member is a mage who has undergone the earlier induction to the Towers of High Sorcery, she can put them through the trial to become a full mage. The trial is done by creating an illusion that puts the character, along with representations of their fellow party members, into the City of Lost Names at the time of its literal fall. This makes for a good roleplay opportunity, as the players have an opportunity to roleplay what their characters would be doing in this situation without their characters actually being in danger. This frees them to do things that are interesting, brave, and potentially really stupid, but which makes sense in context because their characters aren't actually in peril. Now, the character undergoing the test, on the other hand, is in peril, but only if they don't engage with the test. Now, that said, the test is voluntary. You are asked, do you want to undergo the trial? And you need to say yes in order to get to this part. But under those circumstances, if the player's not engaging after saying, yes, I want to do the trial, that falls firmly into douchey player territory. I don't have douchey players in my group, so I didn't have this problem. If I have anything I would say as a potential issue is, well, not an issue, but something where I might run into expectations clashing with the player. It's that there isn't really a situation where, the character could end up with something like Bracelet Magir's Hourglass Eyes, for example, where something that could potentially be a lasting impact on their character and how they exist, depending on what they do in the trial. That said, I don't mind that. Canonically, there was something wonky about Raceland's trial related to the actions of Fist and Dantalus and that sort of thing. So having a more normal trial is fine with me, and if a player's a really big Dragonlance head, they'll understand why. The trial is normal, so to speak. From here, the party is unleashed into the city with notes on where the Temple of Paladine is, where the control tower for the city is, and with that location being very clearly marked as JRPG End of Disc Dungeon, and a house that is being used as an office and check-in point for various patrols. There are also various monsters in the area that are potential random encounters. I didn't mess with them much because my sessions are relatively short, only about 4 hours or so every month, and because D&D 5e combat is just involved enough that it could eat up a fair amount of session time. Now, at the start of this portion, the party elected to make a beeline to the Temple of Paladine to get the Dragonlance purified. There are 3 main fights here, or possible fights. There is an Ent guarding the temple who can be talked past if there's a druid or worshipper of a nature god like Habakkuk and in the party, and since Fletch worships Habakkuk, we didn't have a problem, and I had the Ent let the party know about the pitfalls in the main temple. The second fight is against a Marid who was bound to the city by the king's priest people and doesn't want the city restored, and they go straight to combat. They and the water elemental they summoned were tough enough to nearly take down Tristan, which is kind of the story of this chapter, but there's also no way to talk past them. I recommend as an adjustment to this that Game Masters, if you have a party member who either normally or through magical means can speak Aquatic, have the Marid spout some dialogue during the fight about not wanting to see the city restored, and that they like it better destroyed, so that the party can, if they want, try to talk the Marid down by explaining they don't want the city restored either. The third and also optional fight is in the nave of the temple, where falling into any of the rotted out pits into the floor into the flooded crypts would disturb the dead within. Now, between the warning from the Ent and Fletch having an absurdly high perception, this fight was never really an issue. From here, restoring the Dragonlance was a piece of cake and a big dramatic scene that wrapped up the session. Next up was the house outpost, and while the party attempted a little subterfuge, they did a few things that caught people's hackles up, leading to the entire house going on alert and leading to a massive fight. This was a challenge, but not impossible because everyone here are rank-and-file Dragon Army soldiers who would have been a challenge about 3 levels ago, but now the party could just kind of rip through them. Honestly, the biggest challenge from this fight came to the fact that Isolt's character wasn't based around the standard D&D blaster mage spells. No lightning bolt, no fireball. If you have a mage built like Lena Inverse, this fight would probably be particularly easy. That said, the difficulty level was tuned just right for a party that wasn't combat optimized in that way, where characters nearly went down, but at no point they feel like, oh, they are going to be utterly stomped with no real way to fight back, or alternatively, were just annihilating their opponents in a way that didn't feel fun. Finally, we have the tower that controls everything, the threshold of the heavens. This also led to me finally finding a solution to one of the biggest problems that I had faced this whole campaign in Foundry. Stairs. Foundry doesn't really have a good way of handling the whole matter of stairs that's built into the software itself. For previous dungeons so far, I just made the characters able to move through all environmental objects and just clicked and dragged them to the entrance to the next dungeon level. However, finally, at long last, I found a plugin for stairs that worked. It's called Stairways. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. The designer of this plugin does not have any sort of Ko-fi or Patreon tip jar or anything like that, but if they do in the future, definitely recommend tossing them a couple bucks to help encourage support for the software, or the plugin, because worth it. The players basically bluff their way through the entirety of the tower using the old prisoner to be taken to the commander trick through a combination of really good rolls, getting the password from the manor earlier, and the fact that a lot of the defenses here were automated ones that basically get set off by people pushing buttons that they shouldn't. It turns out that I've got a group of players with the good sense not to push the large candy-like buttons when given the option to do so. Finally, the party reached the top of the tower, and the blue dragon running the show, Balefion. We had some appropriate pre-fight smack talk between the two parties. Balefion tried to take the city airborne, or started the process through activating the helm, which was the big throne in the middle of the room. Initiative was rolled, and Tristan, who has the Dragonlance, rolled like a golden god. Tristan rolled a natural 20 on initiative, with Assault and Fletch not far behind him, and Balefion rolling just low enough that he was behind those 3. Tristan then rushed Balefion, and Tristan has great weapon mastery, so he landed a hit, a crit, and with that crit gets to attack again, and got and got that extra hit after that, and accompanied by some very successful spell attacks from Assault and bow shots from Fletch, meant that Balefion went down before he even got an action. Now, could I have fudged things where he got to act first because this was his lair? Probably. But I feel like this just worked for the moment. First off, Balefion is written as being a villain who likes to gloat and strut his stuff and showboat before the party. And so having him use his initial action rather than just attacking the party right away for being intruders, but instead activating the tower and gloating about how this is the moment of triumph for the Dragon Queen Takesis and all this, that, and the other thing. So having it come down to a conventional initiative roll, that works for me. Additionally, Balefion is the first opponent that the party can attack that the Dragonlance really works against. So it also makes for a moment for the party to get why Dragonlances are such a big deal. Now afterwards, the city starts to collapse under its own weight, and the fact that the tower is no longer piloted and that there isn't enough time for the party member to attune means that they have to flee. And because the party had a fairly straightforward job getting through the rest of this portion of the dungeon, they have slots available for fly spells, and with rescuing the dragon owl earlier from the manor and befriending the ones in the last chapter, it makes a chance for all that to pay off. With the party then has to bail out of the city, with the one part that remains airborne being the Temple of Takesis, where Lord Soth is with the cataclysmic energy as the chapter ends. So this is a much more focused chapter than chapter 5. This worked for me. Again, we meet once a month, 4-hour-long session. This basically took about 3 sessions to go through, 3 months. For other groups, if you're meeting weekly, if you're meeting bi-weekly or fortnightly rather, or if you are doing monthly but you're doing extra longer sessions like 8 hours, I would recommend probably looking on Dungeon Masters Guild for any little plug-in modules or little side quests that people would come up with to flesh out the city further and other spots for the party to come across and explore. Just to kind of stretch this out, maybe to an even 2 sessions or like 2 or 3 sessions, depending on how you want to do this. Next chapter. The campaign comes to a close as the party goes to challenge Lord Soth.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Tossing me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.